Good morning, good Erev Shabbos to everybody. Closing out an amazing week, Baruch Hashem, packed with incredible learning. And we continue our journey through Torah Yud Tes, B'siyata D'Shmaya. And before we begin, this morning's shir is graciously sponsored by our Bernard Bolag, L'ilui Nishmas, his mother, Sarah Deborah Chaya Bas Yehושע, and L'ilui Nishmas Miriam Bas Yehושע, and Yosef ben Abraham, Yehuda, as well as Mrs. Deborah Jacobi in honor of her beloved father, Aryeh Leib and Shlomo, of blessed memory, as well as Yehуда Aryeh ben Yitzchak Meir, whose yahrzeit is today. B'ezras Hashem, all the neshama should have an aliyah in the schus of the learning that we're doing together. This early in the morning, I would say b'mesiras nefesh, which is that extra kind of learning. Some of us slept in chairs last night. Some of us had very few hours last night. And here we are. Mechazi Hashem, I was just WhatsApping you like a couple of minutes ago. And here we are just a few short hours later. Okay. So B'siyata D'Shmaya, we jump back in. Yesterday was a very packed shir, and we had been speaking about the inyan of bris, about the inyan of tikkun bris, the inyan of begama bris, and the relationship between that and the aspect of lashon hakodesh. We're not rehashing the whole entire thing now because it just takes too long to go into the whole inyan. But very basically, the last keta, the last bit that we had learned was the inyan of shame, and the hepech of the inyan of shame or embarrassment, which is kavod. And the Rebbe had said, using the pasuk kabed es Hashem mehoincha, and Chazal had commented altik mehoincha ela megroincha, that the garon, the voice, which Rabbi Nachman is interpreting as the aspect of Hakol Kol Yaakov, which is the bechina of Lashon HaKodesh, the Jewish voice, the Jewish energy of expressivity, of being able to express, is the aspect of Roya Zoynes Yabedhain, that if a person is engaged in experiences of immorality, which are reflective of the energy of the opposite of Lashon HaKodesh, because it's Lashon, but it's not channeling Kodesh, not channeling anything transcendent. So then, it's the Bechina of Roya Zoynes Ya'abed. A person's going to lose their Hain, but like Chazal Kamed, Al Tekrimi Hain Ela Garin, right? A person can lose that. Al Tekrimi Haincha Ela Migraincha. So Kabed Es Hashem Yahaincha is that when a person is in a place of Shmiras Habris, which is the aspect of kavod, because the opposite of kavod is shame, and Chazal had commented based on the Zohar, Rabbi Nachman had commented based on the Zohar, right, that V'lo by Shashu, that Adam and Chava were not wearing any clothing, but it didn't have any shame because they didn't realize it, because they didn't awaken to the aspect of Erva. That was only after they ate from the Eitz Hadas, Toiverad. So we spoke quite a bit that the inyan of shame, right, the inyan of Nahama de Kisufa, which I wrote a Facebook post also yesterday based on our learning, right, the aspect of unearned bread, that whole concept, right, of pagama bread, of trying to go ahead and get something and take pleasure without actually working for it, that there's an inyan of shame there. So the hapich of the flip of that is kavod, and memela, we're going to see the word kavod in the context of kavod es Hashem mei haincha al tikra behaincha, again ela migroincha, because it's a reference to Lashon HaKodesh, which is the aspect of Ruach HaKodesh that Chazal commented. Rashi said on the pasuk, al kein yazav ishes haves ima bedavak beishtai mikan sheneso lehem arayis, and Ruach HaKodesh nemar kain, right? It's all emergent from Lashon HaKodesh, Ruach HaKodesh, Aimeres kain. And that was the last thing that we had learned. And we said, therefore, Yosef HaTzadik is the aspect of Shmiras Habris. Of course, Yosef is Mamish the Tzadik. He withstands temptation with Eishes by Tifar. The pasuk says, Ki pi amadabra aleichem, that's the aspect, according to Chazal, of Lashon HaKodesh, that he was speaking Hebrew to them, and that was the proof that he was their brother. And ultimately, Yosef HaTzadik's very own name is Al Shem, the opposite of embarrassment, right? Because Yosef is the tikkun for that. Yosef is the inyan of kavod, and therefore the pasuk says Asaf Alekim es cherpasi, right? Yosef is called Yosef because it's the removal of cherpa, because it all relates to the concept of kavod, which is bound up with Shmiras Habris, which is bound up with Lashon HaKodesh, which is all embodied in the person of Yosef HaTzadik. Okay, and we carry on over here with the word v'nachash. V'nachash. Do you guys also have it bold, the word v'nachash? It's just in my edition. Do you have it bold over here?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So the tzaddik says, Nachash, shu hara ha'koilel haniskele el. Obviously, we were speaking before about Adam and Chava, right? The whole thing is that they ate from the Eitz Hadas Te'Bara, and Mela, their eyes over their eyes opened up. No, we're still on the other side, right over here, right? So in Nachash, this serpent shu hara ha'koilel, which is the collective evil that Ibn Achman had said, this is the 70 stars, the 70 nations of the world are stuck in this experience of immorality. When a person doesn't have shleimus lashon hakodesh, meaning living in a world again to be attuned and to be awake to the letters that are in everything, which doesn't mean to literally see aleph beis, right? But it reorients the way that we experience all of life, something akin to Torah Yud Zayin, where the tzaddik is discovering the tiferes of Klal Yisrael and all of nature. I don't know if any of you have been misbinded in nature, I'm sure you have, but for me it changed my last couple of days. You walk past a tree, you see the hisparis of Klal Yisrael. The whole nature comes to life. So the same thing with the aleph beis, especially in light of what we had learned at the end of Torah Yud Ches, with regard to Avanim Shleimos Tivneh, right, the aspect of each of the letters having a Yud, which is a portal to Elam Haba, that the tzaddik gives a person the consciousness to be able to live in contact with the Tachlis, no matter what's going on in that person's life, wherever they go, in time and in space, they encounter HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That's called Shleimos Lashon HaKodesh, the binyan of Chava, the binyan of Oitzar, the binyan of Yerushalayim, the bechina of Seif Davar HaKol Nishmas Elikim Yerabes Mitzvos of Shemar, Kizek Kala Adam, to live in contact with the Tachlis. When a person doesn't have Lashon HaKodesh, this is the aspect of the Zohar which states Nachash Shultanuse al Bisra, that the Nachash has Shlita, has its control over Bisra, over flesh. And a Bechinas Chava and Iskal El, the aspect of Chava, Shehi, who is referred to as Basar Mi Bisari, right? Because then Adam Rishon said, now Hapam, right, this time, this is Basar Mi Bisari. But Bechinas Besar Kodesh, which is also in Yirmiyahu, where he was testing the Kehanim, this is Besar Kodesh. This is the aspect of holy flesh. But Bechinas Nachash. But the Nachash can be sholet on this otherwise holy flesh, the Bechin of Lashon HaKodesh, the Bechin of Chava, who is called Basar Mi Besarei, and Nachash Shultanuse al Bisra. Bechinas Nachash, Shepita LeChava, who seduced Chava vehetal bazuama. It's very, very clear from Chazal that although on the surface level this was a pigam that had to do with eating, which is 100% true, and through all the Chazals it emerges that this was an Indian of Arayas. Right, the Indian of the Eitz Hadas Tovara clearly Ban Nachash al Chava vehital bazuama. It says that the Nachash had relations with Chava in some sense, right? Vehital bazuama, and there was the infusion within her of zuama, of an impurity, of a filth. Vehital bazuama shu ruach sa'ara, which is the Ruach Sa'ara. This is the aspect of what we just learned yesterday from Yecheskel, if you remember, or maybe it was yesterday, when we spoke about Chashmal, and Chashmal is Chayis Eish Memalolis, the Bechina of Chashmal, the Mal of the 70 stars that we had mentioned, of the torch, of the Taveras, Taivas Mishkal, this aspect of the Taiva Yedua of all the nations of the world. Prior to seeing the Chashmal, Yecheskel sees the Nogah, that was the glow. And prior to that, we enumerated the 3 klipas, hatameas legamri, in the Lashon of the Tanya, where he sees 3 klipas, 3 very harsh and concealing forces of Ra, which are the Anan Gadol, the Eish Mislakachas, and the Ruach Sa'ara, right? And he encounters all these 3 things. He encounters this big fire, he encounters the wind, and he encounters the Ruach Sa'ara. What was the first one? Eish Mislakachas, Ruach Sa'ara, and the Anan Gadol, right? And the big cloud. These 3 of the Shalish Klivas Atmeis Legamri. And so the Nachash is Mamash the Ruach Sa'ara, which is the collectivity, because it's the third of the prior 2, right? The Ruach Sa'ara, this is something that we learned about, if you remember, in Torah Ches, when we learned about the Esav, right? Where Esav says Yeshli Rav. Esav is the Bechina of the Ish Sa'ir, the Bechina of Ruach Sa'ara, Yeshli Rav. He also has a Bechina of life force, but he's Mekabel from a place that it's Takif Lefi Shah, it's a hurricane, we said, but it only lasts for a very brief time. And that's the whole energy of the Yitzhara. Peak experiences of, let's say, neurobiologically, we spoke yesterday of dopamine hits, but in a peak way, and nothing can compete with it, but it only lasts for a very short time, and then a person is back to base level, and probably much worse than they would have been, like we said yesterday, when the person's whole brain is hijacked in such a way that they can no longer experience just the general oxygen of life, and they need a ruach sa'ara to get them to. But what about stam life? But the Nachash is ruach sa'ara, ruach shtus, which of course is going to be the hepech of ruach ha-kodesh, which is lashon ha-kodesh. This is ruach sa'ara. Eishes ksilos. This is the aspect of the woman of folly, the foolish woman. Means an experience of the Isha, which is all of nature, which we said is Malchus, is Chava, but in interactions with women that are there's Ksilas there. It's the Bechina of the Ruach Shtus, right? It's the spirit of folly, where it means that this relationship is not built on das, on letters that are communicating something deeper. It's a Lashon Kodesh, that there's no Ishvi Isha Zacha Shechina Shri B'nei, there's nothing. It's hollow, it's empty. Eishes Ksilas. And this comes to counteract, in the form of the Nachash, comes to counteract the Holy Spirit, which is the holy tongue, Isha Chachma, which is the woman of Chachma, which is also made reference to in Mishlei, Chachma is Nashim, the knowledge of women, right? The aspect of the experience of this whole world, which is the Bechina of Chava Malchus, but it should be bursting with meaning. It shouldn't be Isha Ksilas. Right? Eishes Ksilas. This is Chachmois Nashim. And comes the Nachash and Metal Bazuama and comes along and he's matil and he injects within Chava this Zuama. V'zebechinas lepesach chatas roivet. Sin crouches at the entrance. From here we see from Chazal that the Yetzer Tov only enters a person at 13 years old, but the Yetzer Hara is right away. Right away. Lepesach chatas roivet. Sin is already crouching at the opening. Says the Rebbe, what Pesach? La Pesach, says the tzaddik, hanu pische picha shalashon hakodesh. Pesach, the mouth is a Pesach. Psach picha via iru dvarecha. Right? The bechina psach picha, to open one's mouth, and the words are illuminating. La Pesach chatas roivet. Rabbi Nachman sees the Yetzer Hara as crouching at the opening of one's mouth to transform their otherwise holy tongue of lashon hakodesh, which would be the bechina of chachmais nashim, and it turns into Eishes Ksilas. It turns into Ruach Sa'ara as opposed to Ruach HaKodesh. This is the aspect of the Nachash, which is the collective contrast to holy tongue, to holy words, and it shifts everything and it turns everything around. And this is Lepesach Chatas Revit. So now, especially just a couple of minutes ago, as I was sort of explaining this particular part, everything in the Torah thus far that we've learned in Torah Yates is put into the 5 elements of Yecheskel's vision, right? Which basically the whole Sefer Tanya, right? Which we also encountered the Bechin of Tzadik V'Toivla, Tzadik V'Ralai, Tzadik Shalim, Tzadik Eina Shalim, earlier in, I believe was it Torah Hey, right? Where we encountered that aspect of the different. Was it Torah Hey? It was Torah Dalet. Torah Dalet. Yeah. No. One of the Torahs, maybe Torah Zayin, I don't know, I remember right now, but one of the Torahs, Torah Ches, right? Tzadik Gomer, Tzadik, what's a Tzadik Gomer, what's a Tzadik Eina Gomer? So that's obviously a huge theme in Tanya, but also the whole Tanya is basically built on the system of the Shalosh Kelipas Hatmeis Legamri, of these 3 completely unholy forces that are called Kelipas, again, because a Kelipa is a shell, and a shell conceals the fruit, right? And the fruit, so to speak, is HaKadosh Baruch Hu's presence, and a Kelipa is anything that will conceal that. And that's sort of bound up in these 3 forces, the Shalosh Kelipas Hatmeis Legamri. Then, all the way to the extreme on the other side, you have Chashmal, which is, like we said, Chayish, Eish Memalalois, it's the Bechina of Chava. Isha Memalalois is also Bechina of speech, right? B'Lashon HaKodesh, that comes Lashon Noifel HaLashon, that overtakes and destroys. That Mal is the 70 nations, right? And all of their negative influences, and is able to stand up, like Abraham Avinu, Echad Avram Ivri, to stand on one side and the whole world stands on the other side. That's the Bechina that we were talking about in the Bechina of Chashmal. And then in the middle we have Noigah. Noigah is the aspect of the glow. What's the inyan of the glow? According to the Balatanya, every single thing in this world is split and divided among these 3 categories. Things that are usher Why are they called asur, says the Baal HaTanya? What does the word asur mean? Not forbidden, tied, bound, kashur, kasher v'asur. They are bound up to the side of the shalosh kelipas hatmeis legamri. They cannot be elevated at all. Things that are chashmal, on the other side, is total kedusha. Right? And so, mitzvahs, and holy places, and holy people, this is all on the side of chashmal. What's the Nogah? The Nogah is this very, very, very powerful and almost universal, because you find it almost everywhere in everything. It's a category of things that are neither totally bad nor totally good, but they can be either elevated into kedusha or they can be dragged down into tumah. And these are things that are not mitzvahs and they're not averos, but they are mutter. And so stam, a cup of tea, it's not a mitzvah, it's not an avera. It depends. If a person drinks without a bracha, or a person drinks without the right kavana, it can go into the shalosh kelipas hatmeis legamri. Person makes a bracha, you elevate it. So the whole chasidus is all built essentially on the Kelipas Nogah. This was the gili of the Baal Shem Tov. Before the Baal Shem Tov, we knew about mitzvahs, we knew about averos. Came along the Baal Shem Tov and he said the whole realm of Kelipas Nogah, going to work, hanging out with friends, relationships that a person has, stam food that a person eats, stam sleep that people get or don't get, whatever it is that a person does, it's Kelipas Nogah, you can serve Hashem with it too. Avodas Hashem is not only relegated to the overt experiences of spirituality or lack thereof, but all of life is an arena of serving HaKadosh Baruch Hu b'chol drachecha da'ehu, to be able to build an intimate connection with Hashem. We said da, vav, hey, right? Wherever a person goes, you find the raglei hashchina in that place, a person is able to elevate it into kedusha. The same is true for the whole entire structure of the world, which is built on these 5 elements, meaning 3 elements that are bound up as one in the shalosh kelipas hatmeis, that's one category together, and then chashmal, and then the middle, which is Kelipas Nogah. So it's essentially 3 different realms, right? Even though the first has 3 elements in it. That's the shalosh kelipas that are all bound together as one in the realm of total tumah. Then we have the realm of total kedusha, and we have the realm that's in between. For example, the structure of the week is exactly this way. What's the chashmal in the week? Shabbos. Shabbos is total kedusha. What is the shalosh kelipas hatmeis in relative terms to Shabbos? Is the chol, the 6 days of the week. What's the Kelipas Nogah? Erev Shabbos, Bein Hashmashis, right after Plag, where a person can make an early Shabbos, and in that sense, that's the part of the week that literally could either stay chol or you can turn it into Shabbos. The same is true in makom, right? What would you say in the realm of space is chashmal? So chashmal is Eretz Yisrael. Shalosh kelipas hatmeis legamri is everywhere else is chutz la'aretz, and the Kelipas Nogah is a little bit more difficult.
The larger borders.
Tzaddikim say the Yarden, right, or Evra Yarden, but the Yarden, because depending on how you see it, either the Yarden is within or it's out, right? And this is the way that it goes, right? Across the board, we have this aspect of Tumah, of Kedusha, and then the realm of the mutter. And so we've been speaking in this context about these 3 elements as well. The shalosh kelipas hatmeis legamri is the Nachash, is the Ksilos, is the Ruach Sa'ara, is the Hepech of Lashon HaKodesh, of Ruach HaKodesh. This is the Zuama of the Nachash and the 70 nations of the world with all the Tumah. That's that. Chashmal is Lashon HaKodesh. That's mamish the opposite. What's in the middle? So let's take a look at Ois Daled. Ve'dah says the Heilige Rebbe Schus Yagar Leinu Mal Kol Yisrael Amen She'eshes Ksilos Azais. These shalosh kelipas hatmeis legamri of the Nachash. This Eshes Ksilos she klalis harash al shivim lashon, which is the collective evil, the collective tumah, the collective immorality of the 70 nations. I efshel lehem linak mi isha chachma lashon hakodesh sheniskala el agide bechinas eitz hadas toivera. It is unable to have its life force, meaning to be able to exist in the first place, unless it's drawing energy from chashmal. Because again, the klipas don't exist. The klipas are leeches. Without having something to leech from, they can't exist. Right? And that's what the pasuk says, Saviv Risha'im Yishalachim. The pasuk in Tehillim says, which we've encountered in the past, The Risha'im, which doesn't just mean the wicked, but it means all forces of Resha, of evil, are Saviv Risha Mishalachan. Why do they go surrounding? It's like if a person, is walking down the street and sometimes you see like swarms of ants. Right? Sometimes you see such a thing and like you see like a black mass moving. If a person takes like some kind of crumb and you drop it nearby, all of a sudden all the ants converge on that thing, right? What's the Indian? Saviv Risha Mishalachan. Because they're trying to be yonik, they're trying to get sustenance from the thing that you drop. And it's the same thing with forces of wickedness and kedusha. They leech off of kedusha. Saviv Risha Mishalachan. It's like a bunch of ants that are surrounding just a speck of kedusha, and they're trying to be yonik from that. And it's a moment of great realization when a person realizes that he's stuck in darkness, when he realizes that he's not stuck in darkness. The darkness is surrounding him because he is mamish kadosh. And the darkness that surrounds, not he's stuck there happens to be, it's the darkness is attracted to be yonik from something that's kadosh. And therefore the shalosh klibas atmeis legamri cannot survive without drawing their chiyas, their chayas, their life force from the place of tahara and kedusha of chashmal. But how are they going to do that? Here you have the shalosh klibas atmeis legamri. Here you have chashmal. They're not next to each other. How are they going to access chashmal? So says the Rebbe, the only way that they could be yonik from the bechina of Isha Chachma, or Chachama, which is the aspect of Chava, which is the aspect of Lashon HaKodesh, Milashon HaKodesh and Iskala El, the only way is Ella al Yedei Bechinas Eitz Hadas Toivera. Eitz Hadas Toivera in the Zohar Kadosh is synonymous with the Kelipas Nogah. Eitz Hadas, which I think the Baal Tanya brings this also. The Eitz Hadas Toivera is Nogah. Why? Because think of it. It is the tree of knowledge of both good and evil. That's the realm of Noga. Noga is something that can theoretically be both. It can be either or. It can either be Kodesh or it can be Chol. It can either be Toiv or it can be Ra. It is this energy that's in between exactly. And the Eitz Hadas Toiv Ra is the way, think of it. It's unbelievably deep because it changes the whole Bereshis narrative. It enables the Nachash to be yonek from Chava. That's really what's happening here, because the Nachash and Chava are diametrically opposed. She is Lashon HaKodesh, the Nachash is Ruach Shtus, the Nachash is the Ruach of Ruach Sa'ara, as opposed to Ruach HaKodesh, which is Lashon HaKodesh, like Kama Oid Ruach Be'ish, which is the aspect of Yichud in a holy way, like we said earlier. These two things are contrasting one to the other. So how is the Nachash going to go ahead and attack Chava, which is exactly how he did it, which is by seducing her to interact with the Eitz Hadas Toivera. Thereby, the Kelipas Nogah is able to dislodge itself from connection to Kedusha, and Mamela, it's able to be mired down into the realm of the Shalosh Kelipas Atmeis Legamri, and the Nachash is able to be yonik from that. And that's why the Nachash wanted to go ahead and cause Chava to eat from the Eitz Hadas Toivera, because the Nachash, Shalosh Kelipas Atmeis Legamri, is trying to draw Kedusha from Chashmal, and the only way that it can get there and access it is by flipping around the Eitz Hadas Tov Ra, right? Where the Tov of the Eitz Hadas Tov, which is connected to the Ra, all of a sudden is morid. It brings it down into the realm of the Shalosh Kelipas Hatmeis Legamri. Says the Rebbe, the Eitz Hadas, right? Shal Yada Yumafates Halashon HaKodesh Umeta Bazuama. It's specifically through what's called the Kelipas Nogah, which is this glow in between that Yecheskel sees, that the Nachash is able to interact with Chava in this way and is able to inject this filth within her. The Eitz Hadas, Sheyesh Bo Shnei Koichos, Shehin Toivera, which is the aspect of the Kelipas Nogah that could be both. It's the Indian of Heter, and it depends on how we engage with it, with consciousness or without consciousness, with the Ruach of Kedusha or Ruach Shtos. It has Toivera. So who emtsai bein Lashon HaKodesh, who Eishes Chachma Shekulei Toiv, u bein Lashon Shel Shivim Amamin, which is the Nachash, which is the Shalosh Kelipas Atmeis Legamri Shekulei Ra. So now think of it. If we're talking now on the level of language, where we set it up again. What's the chashmal of language? Lashon HaKodesh. What's the Shalosh Kelipas Atmeis Legamri of language? The shyness of the Umas Eilam. What's the Kelipas Nogah? Says the Rebbe, the Eitz Hadas Toivera Zeloshin Targum. Aramaic is the Kelipas Nogah. It's in between. Shuhu emtsa'i bein lashon hakodesh or bein lashon shel shivim amim. Targum, the Targum Onkelos, the Talmud Bavli, the Zohar Kodesh, so many other texts, Sefer Daniel, different texts, some scattered words even throughout Tanakh, as we're going to see, is Targum. Arami is Aramaic, Aramish. What is it? It's the Kelipas Nogah language. It stands as a mediation between the nations of the world, because it's Aramean, however you pronounce it in English, right? It's Arami. Armenian? Is it Armenian?
No, Aramaic.
Aramaic. Yeah, but it's Aramean. Yeah, Aramean. Right. Okay. On the one side, and then you have Lashon HaKodesh on the other side. And in the middle, this is the Targum. Says the Eli Rebbe. Unbelievable. Ulashain Amamin, the languages of the nations of the world. Which again, it's just code word for the Shalosh Klipas Atmeis Legamri. In this context, when they want to draw on the Kedusha of Lashon HaKodesh, Targum is the mediating energy that enables the Lashonis of the Amim to draw their life force from Lashon HaKodesh, which is Chashmal. And Lashon Targum her Bechinas Isha Maskalas. The Indian of Targum, right, is the aspect of the enlightened woman, who's somewhere in between the Eishes Ksilos, also in Mishlei, and the Chachmas Nashim, which is also in Mishlei. This is the aspect of the third kind of woman. The Isha, which as we said is Dibor, right, is Malchus, is Chava, who's the Indian of the Isha Maskeles, right, the aspect of the Isha Maskeles. Bechinas Maskil, what does it mean, Maskil? Says the Gemara in Psachim, Maskil al Yidei Turgaman. There's an Indian of Haskala, which is brought in Dafka through having a Turgaman, having a translator. Says the Rebbe, so this is the Eishes, or Isha Maskeles. Why? Ki Lashon Targum Yishbo Tovara. Because Targum could, again, it could be either or. Sometimes it's the aspect of intellect, which is the Toiv, which is more connected to the Chachmos Nashim, which is the Bechina of enlightenment and clarity, and the opposite of the Ruach Shtus, but the Ruach of Das. Sometimes it can be a language of barren, something that's fruitless, that doesn't produce fruit, that's destroyed. It can be both, same letters, right? It can be either maskil, that's the Eitzadas Toiv, or it can be mishakel, which is the Eitzadas Toiv Vira. The Eishes Ksilos Hazais, and the aspect of Eishes Ksilos, which is the Nachash, which is the Ruach Sa'ara, which is Shalosh Klipas Atmeis Legamri, Ki Mefate Es HaIsha Chachama Ayidei Isha Maskelas. This is how he's interacting with the holy woman of the Bechina of Isha Chachama, and he interacts with her through the aspect of the Isha Maskelas that could go one way or another. Ki Iker Tagbayers HaKlipa, because the primary empowerment of the Klipa, Eina Ela Yidei Lashon Targum, is all through the Lashon of the Targum, of Bechinas, the Pasuk of Devarim, which says Arami Oived Avi. Who's that a reference to? We say it in the Haggadah. Lavan. Bechinas mi min Aram yanchini Balak. Right? In Bilam's song, he says that Balak led me from Aram. Right? It's an interesting thing. Bilam was connected to Aram, and so everything that curses Klai, so the Bechina of Lavan Arami, was also Aramai. Right? Same idea. Who's Mirame Yaakov Avinu and drives him crazy. The Bechina of Lavan, the Bechina of Bilam, is all Aram. This is the Klipa, Shulashon Targum, Shulashon Arami, Shederach Sham Misayrim Linach Me'akadusha, because they're able to draw their life force, because Targum is more elevated than all of the other languages of the nations of the world. They're able to draw Kedusha from there, and therefore both Lavan and Bilam are drawing their life force from the Bechina of Aram, of Targum. Ve'ikr binyana u'shleima shel Lashon HaKodesh. The primary construction, we're talking the whole time about construction, vayiven, and the bechina of avanim shleimas tivneh, and the aspect of alter gerbanayach ala boynayach, right? It's a Talmidei Chacham who build up the world by recognizing the Lashon HaKodesh and everything, and finding the yud within every letter, which is the portal to beyond, which means that the world is full of meaning and clear communication from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The ikar binyan and the shleimas of Lashon HaKodesh eina ela al yidei shmapilin hara shel Targum o malas hatoiv shebetargum LaLashon HaKodesh, is the casting down of the Ra within Targum, because again Targum is the Eitz Hadas Toiv Ra, as both, and elevating the holiness into Lashon HaKodesh. Shal yidei zeh nishlam Lashon HaKodesh. This is actually the total completion of Lashon HaKodesh. By the way, this sounds very familiar to me and very similar to what we had learned in Torah Yud Zayin Ois Dalid with regard to the shleimus of the Pegam HaMizbeach. How was it? Where did we get the shleimus HaMizbeach from? Where did it come from? From? No, Achila was the Pegam of the Mizbeach, right? And that's manifest on Achila. How did we get shleimus HaMizbeach? If you remember, through Gerim, right? Now when the Gerim draw close, all the nitzotzos that splintered off from the Mizbeach, which is the toiv in all of the cultures, right, that's carried back into Yiddishkeit from the Gerim, which we spent a lot of time talking about. This is the aspect of the shleimus of the Mizbeach. We're seeing something very similar here. That the shleimus of Lashon HaKodesh, it's the bechina of the Mizbeach, right, the shleimus where we bring karbanos, is l'karev otanu, to bring us close to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The shleimus is daika through Targum, which is elevating all of the holy sparks, right, that exist in all of the foods that are mutter, right, and a person utilizes a holy engagement with all of the world to elevate the sparks, that the nitzaitza should come back. That is the shleimus of Lashon HaKodesh. So it's not pshat that it's a bonus. That we have Lashon HaKodesh, and then also we need to elevate the sparks from Targum, from the nations of the world. This is the primary binyan of Kedusha, is daika this, when there's a Tosefes of Shabbos Yontiv, right, when we're bringing everything from the 6 days of the week up and into that place. So he says the ikar binyan u'shleima shel Lashon HaKodesh eina ela al yidei shemapilin hara shel Targum. When we cast away the negative aspect of Targum, u'malas hatoiv shebetargum LaLashon HaKodesh, and we carry up, we bring up the goodness of the Targum, we lift it up into Lashon HaKodesh. Shal yidei zeh nishlam Lashon HaKodesh. Isn't that fascinating? Lashon HaKodesh is dependent upon this aspect of being mala, all of the toiv that's embedded in the nations of the world, and lifting it up all through the bechina of Targum, because Targum is the mediating force. Targum is the doorway that allows us to lift up all of the holy nitzaitzos, and through that to be mashlim the Lashon HaKodesh of Kedusha, that comes from the sparks that come from the lashonos of the nations of the world.
Well, just Aramaic? Or
just Aramaic. Just Aramaic. Dafka Aram, right? That's what he said, right, about Arami Ovid Avi and Min Aram Yanchini Balak. So it's just this particular language that Torah Sheba'al Peh was written in, much of it.
Like the Megillah.
Huh?
Like in what language the Megillah can be read?
In Aramaic as well.
I think any language.
I think in any language also. Yeah. Okay, we'll have to look into that. But this is this amazing thing. This is this amazing thing of the Targum. Says the Rebbe, and I'll look back inside. Unbelievable. V'lavan ha'arami, shu arami oived avi hanizker la'el. This Lavan, who is the Arami from Aram, who is the Arami oived avi, ratzalinak me'akadusha al yedei Targum. He wanted to draw from Kedusha through Targum. Valkain, when he makes a bris with Yaakov Avinu, Karaloi, he calls it Yigar Sa'adusa. He calls it this heap of testimony, right, with the pile of stones that they made over there, and he calls it Yigar Sa'adusa in Aramaic. Yaakov Avinu is not falling for this trick. Yaakov Avinu says, it's very nice that you, Lavan, which is the Mamish, the Shalosh Kelipas Nogah, are trying to draw from my Kedusha in a covenant with me, right, through the aspect of Aramaic, because you're calling this something that's through Targum. There is no Targum here, says Yaakov Avinu. The Yaakov hayamala es Targum LaLashon HaKodesh. Yaakov Avinu had already elevated whatever Targum was in that place into Kedusha. Valkein kara legal aid LaLashon HaKodesh. Yaakov Avinu says, we're not calling this thing anything in Aramaic because that's your trick. You're going to draw from there, right? Kedusha. I already elevated it. This thing that you call Yigar Sadusa, I call Gal Eid. It's already included in Kedusha, in Lashon HaKodesh. So what did we say about Adam and Chava? Chava, now we're understanding, is the aspect of the creation of language. And as the mother of all being, even though Enechanami Chava is really Lashon HaKodesh, and that's the way that we've been learning it, now we're understanding that Lashon more generally actually has 3 women in it. Right? There's 3 aspects of woman. There's the Eishes Ksilus, which is the Shalosh Kelipas Nogah. There's the Isha Chachama of the Chashmal of Lashon HaKodesh, and there's the Isha Maskeles of Targum. Right? And that's the Indian of Chava. The creation of Chava took place, I think we spoke about this yesterday, when HaKadosh Baruch Hu put Adam into an aspect of Tardema. He put him into a deep slumber. Vayapel Hashem Alekim Tardema. And through the Tardema, Chava was cut off, right? And Chava was built up into her own realm, into her own person. Says the Rebbe, so Tardema is Gematria Targum. Vayapal Hashem Alekim Tardema, that what's the darkness is the Bechina of Targum. That allows for the creation of this other realm, because the only way that the other realm can exist, which is the Nachash Bazuama, is through Targum, and that's the great darkness that HaKadosh Baruch Hu brings into the world that allows the Kelipas to exist, because they are Yonik, they are drawing their life force from Kedusha. So Tardema is the same gematria as Targum. Kehal Yedidim Targum, it is through the aspect of that darkness. It is through the aspect of that splitting off. It's through the aspect of the Targum, that Ikr Binyana Shal Lashon HaKodesh, that's how Lashon HaKodesh is built. If you want to build up Chava, there's got to be Tardema. Right? Meaning there has to be the Targum, which Enechanami on the one hand could allow for the drawing down of Kedusha into the lower realms, but it can also allow for the elevation of the lower realms into Kedusha. Once we access Shleimus Lashon HaKodesh, and when a person has Shleimus Lashon HaKodesh, which is Ruach HaKodesh, that counteracts the Ruach Sa'ara, the Ruach Shtus, the aspect of the bizayon of a person who's living in the Bechina of Roya Zoynos, the Abadhoid, right? And no, it's an aspect of Kabedis Hashem Yehoincha. So what happens? So we had learned in Rashi on the pasuk that tells us that L'zais Yikari Isha. This is why Chava is called Isha Kimi Ishlu Kachazais, because she was taken from an Ish. What did Rashi told us? Lashon Neufel al Lashon, right? That and what's the depth of Lashon Neufel al Lashon? When we are connected to Lashon HaKodesh, Lashon so Neufel al Lashon. This causes the other Lashonis of the Umas Ha'olam to have their downfall. So says the Rebbe, now we understand, well, how do you get Shleimus Lashon HaKodesh? Through the aspect of Tardema, through the aspect of Targum, through the aspect of elevating everything through Aramaic up to Kedusha to Lashon HaKodesh, Memela, that causes Neuflin Kol HaShivim Lashon. So all of the other 70 languages have their downfall, but Bechinas Lashon, Neufel, Al Lashon, like we said earlier, says the Rebbe, beautiful. If Tardema is Gematria Targum, so the words Vayapel Hashem Elokim Tardema, when HaKadosh Baruch Hu was mapil, when Hashem cast upon Adam a darkness, says the Rebbe, look at the word Vayapel is an Otrikon, it's Rosh Tevis, and the Rosh Tevis says Peh Lahem V'lo Yedaber. They have a mouth, but V'lo Yedaber, they will not be speaking anymore. You know why? Because Vayapel Peh Lahem V'lo Yedaberu, Hashem Elokim Tardema. Tardema is Targum. If you have Targum, which is the Bechina of the Kelipas Nogah, so that Memela the Shalosh Kelipas Nogah cannot be yoning from Kedusha, because you elevated Targum into the creation of Chava, which is Lashon HaKodesh. Memela Lashon Neufel al Lashon. Memela Pelahem V'lo Yedaberu. Memela, they have no mouth. They have a mouth, but they have no speech. Next, the Rosh Hashanah is Vayapel. Vayapel Hashem Lekim Tardema. Yosef, going back to Yosef HaTzadik. Yosef HaTzadik, who had Shleimus Lashon HaKodesh, that's why Yosef HaTzadik was able to interpret dreams. Why? What's one makasher to a dream? Says the Rebbe, Ki ikra chaloimu b'sheina. Because when does a person dream? when they're sleeping. Bechinas tardema, hainu tardema. Sleep is Kelipas Nogah. Persons in sleep, it can go one way or another. Sleep can be very beneficial for a person, it can be very harmful for a person. Right? Sleep is a very dangerous thing. Reb Nosson in Likutei Halachos, in the Hilchos Hashkamas HaBoiker, and a little bit in Hilchos Netilas Yadayim Shacharis, and a little bit in Hilchos Tzitzis, also a little bit, but mostly Netilas Yadayim Shacharis. Reb Nosson takes in two drashas, two completely different approaches to Netilas Yadayim, which comes as a result of a person waking up from sleeping. In one drasha, Reb Nosson says that sleep is mamish, the worst experience in the world, because a person is taking their otherwise functioning brain, which is the aspect of your seichel, a person's consciousness, and a person sleeps, means they're going into a lesser realm of consciousness. They're not conscious. And that's why there's a tumah that comes upon a person when a person sleeps. That's when a person wakes up and they have tumah, right? And that's the whole inyan of netilas yadayim shacharis, because a person wakes up and a person is just coming out of a realm of subconsciousness. But Reb Nosson says that on the other hand, sleep can also be a bechina of adelo yada ben Aryeh Leib Mordechai, meaning rising beyond the person's consciousness, where a person is in such a lofty realm that daika, says Reb Nosson, not pshat that there's a tumah on your hand because a person slept and now they need to do netilas yadayim. But it's that netilas yadayim means that if a person was just in a place of such elevated das that's beyond the human brain to be able to comprehend in a regular wakeful consciousness, that a person was in a state of sleep. So Gewalt, from there, says Reb Nosson, Ushaftem Mayim B'Sasa, we want to draw with Netilas Yadayim, we're drawing down Mayim from that place, because we just had an experience spiritually of the loftiest realm. Now we want to draw that down. You see, sleep can go one way or another. Sleep is the Bechina of the Eitz Hadas, Toiv V'Ra. It can either be refreshing, and it can give a person everything they need, new energy for a new day, and Chas v'Shalom, it can also be, a Rebbe of mine used to call it, a temporary suicide. I can't remember the first word he used for it, but it's essentially, he goes, the Bachram the whole day, they're sleeping the whole entire day. He says, you're killing you, what are you doing here? This life is time is life, you can be productive, you can accomplish something, it's in a sense, a person, Chas v'Shalom, could be the opposite, He used to have this big thing against, people waking up for shacharis, then they used to go back to bed, and he used to go crazy about it. Like, once you're up, you're up. And this is what it used to be. People would wake up, they'd push themselves, and you didn't see them until 11 o'clock in the morning. They went back to bed. So back to bed, because it says the Rebbe, sleep is Eitz Hadas Toivera. Because sleep is the Tardema. Ushleimus Lashon HaKodesh Hu Al Yidei Tardema. And we said that the Shleimus Lashon HaKodesh also comes through the Tardema Shebechinas Targum Kaniskal El, which is the Targum. V'al Kein Yosef, therefore Yosef HaTzadik Shezach the Shleimus Lashon HaKodesh, that Yosef was Eichel, like we said, to Shleimus Lashon HaKodesh Ki Bia Medaber Aleichem She'ikr Shleimus Al Yidei Tardema Kaniskal El, that the Ikr Binyan of Chava is through the Tardema, which is Lashon Targum, and therefore Vayapel is Pele Hevelei Daberu, because Lashon Eifla Lashon. That's how Yosef HaTzadik understood how to interpret dreams in the Tardema. What's pshat in interpretation? What does it mean to interpret something? To interpret something means that the thing itself doesn't have essential meaning. We can confer meaning upon it. And as long as there are multiple interpretations, it can usually go one way or another way. What else can go one way or another way? The Eitz Hadas, Toiv, V'Ra. Memela. If sleep, Tardema, is the Bechina of Targum, because it's Gematria Targum, so it is the energy of the Kelipas Nogah that can go one way or another. Mela, a person's visuals, which is the dreams that a person has, can either have good dreams or nightmares. It can go both ways because it's rooted in the Eitz Hadas. You understand? The Eitz Hadas Toivera. Memela, says the Gemara in Brachas, a dream is Holech Achar, the interpretation. Why? Because it's all Kelipas Nogah. Kelipas Nogah also goes after the interpretation because the whole world is a dream, which is, I think, how we met each other, right? You remember before Hanukkah, this was exactly what we were learning, that the whole world, according to the Ishbitzer, the Lechem is B'chinav Chaloim, and how a person interacts with food, and how a person interacts with life. It is literally all a dream because this world largely, outside of the aspects that are Shalosh Kelipas Atreis Legamri, this world largely is a place of Kelipas Nogah, and it's up to us to elevate. What does it mean to elevate? To interpret this dream in a holy way, to look around at the world and not to see that the world is created with information, but it emerges from a place of meaninglessness. Chas v'shalom, but to see Lashon HaKodesh, to see HaKadosh Baruch Hu's presence in the world, to see meaning in the world, to see purpose in the world, to see communication in the world, to see HaKadosh Baruch Hu reaching out to us. This is the interpretation of this dream. Therefore, so Yosef Atzadik, who's the Bechina of Shemir Sabris. Oh my gosh, it's unbelievably deep. Yosef Atzadik, who's the Bechina of Ruach HaKodesh, who therefore is the Bechina of Lashon HaKodesh. Ki pi ha'medaber aleichem. And Chazal comment over there that was Lashon HaKodesh. Memela Yosef, who's the Bechina of Asaf Alikim is Cherpasi, because there's no greater Cherpa than Arla. That the Bechina of Arla is the covering overs, like we spoke a little bit last night. Whereas the Bechina of Pagam Abris, Memela Yosef HaTzadik, who's in the Bechina of Lashon HaKodesh, is able to utilize the Tardema, the Targum, which is the sleep, which is the Bechina of Chelm, dreams, and he's able to lift our Chalom. He's able to elevate the dream of Olam Hazeh by seeing it as the Deborah of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. He lives in a world of Lashon HaKodesh. Memela, his interpretation of all of the world is in an elevated way. He knows how to interpret dreams. He knows how to squeeze meaning out of them, that they shouldn't chas v'shalom remain because they emerge from the place of Tardema, nightmares that are totally meaningless, because the world could be a nightmare otherwise. Like Yaakov Avinu, who looks at the thing that Lavan Arami called Yigar Sa'adusa, and he says, no, this is Galeid. He knows how to interpret it differently. Shubachinas Targum. He knows how to go ahead and to bring out the goodness in the dream. Shubachinas Tardema, Bachinas Targum, which is the aspect of the Tardema, this bewildering state, Bachinas Targum, Targum, because he's able to go ahead and he's able to clarify the Lashon Targum, this aspect of the Aramaic. That Yosef Atzadik, who is rooted in a place of Lashon HaKodesh, is memela able to be sholit on the realm of Targum, which is Tardema, which is Chaloim of Eitz Hadas Tov Ra, and memela he and he alone is able to interpret the dreams and to bring them up into the realm of Kedusha. If you ever remember, in the context of Torah Gimel, and also in the context of Torah Dalid, when we spoke about Ayin, and we spoke about Moshe Rabbeinu, V'lo Ishas K'varasa, even Moshe Rabbeinu didn't know, there's a Bechina of Moshe going up into a place of Ayin, going up to a place which is even in a certain sense beyond letters, right? Remember? Going into a place which is the Ratzon HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Mamish, beyond, and that's the Bechina Rabbi Nachman said over there, of Ratzai, rising up to a very lofty realm. From the Rebbe said, ultimately, the Ikra Avodah is the Shaiv, the Ikra Avodah is coming back down, the Ikra Avodah is creating a Klifrit, and we spoke then about mental health, and we spoke that today, right, there are people who are utilizing different substances, mostly plant-based, that can bring a person into that state of ayin, that can bring a person into oceanic oneness, that can melt a person's ego away, etc. Some people call them psychedelics, some people call them plant medicine, but this is a ubiquitous experience, maybe a little bit, too out of hand, by the Hasidim. It's like a very big thing, and it's sometimes not guided carefully, and it has to be in a healthy way with healthy people and administered properly, and so on and so forth, and only in particular circumstances, situations, and there are different kinds of substances, and the whole thing is a huge sugya. Be that as it may, this is something, that many, many, many people will have encountered, but it's a lot more common than a lot of people think. But this is something that's happening. And if you think of it very carefully, because you have to understand what's the omic of it. And again, I'm just making a suggestion. I don't claim to know anything. I really don't claim. Everything I say is just suggesting. I'm trying to figure this world out. It's a mystery. But when a person's misbainin about this, and if you understand that if you take the letters of Yud and He and Vav and He, and I had to find the Eitz Hadas Tov Ra, the Eitz Hadas Tov Ra emerges from the Vav of Yud Kei Vav Kei, because that's the place of Tov and Ra, the aspect of Zer Anpin, right, which there's Chesed and Gvura. Things can go either way. And in a certain sense, again, generally we're speaking in very relative terms, but the last Hey is just the Bechina of Ra, because the Olam Asiyah, and then beyond that is Mamish, Bina, the first Hey is the oneness of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So you look at these substances that come from plants, right? So some of them come from mushrooms, right? Psilocybin is the chemical name. Some of them come from different kinds of plants. Dimethyltryptamine, as DMT comes from certain kinds of wood and other kinds of plants. There are many kinds of plants that can produce these kinds of substances that have this kind of almost miraculous, bizarre effect on people that nobody really understands how they work and what it is. But this is what it does. So you think of it. What's the bechina of this? What's the inyan here? And immediately, in any aspect of literature that a person encounters about these substances, you immediately encounter that people have very varied experiences that are generally grouped in two ways. There are either good trips, they're called, or there are bad trips. Good trips or bad trips. Right now, from a therapeutic perspective, not into the whole thing, from a therapeutic perspective, there's no such thing as a bad trip because there's always information there, which is very deep, that you can utilize, that you can figure this out. But what's very dangerous is if a person has experiences and sees visuals and gets messages from beyond and comes back and immediately they say the first thing they do is wait, don't make any decisions. You have to integrate, you have to process. But a person comes back and starts, making decisions, lav davka. Because and there's a whole sugya, but if sleep is 1/60th of death and 1/60th of prophecy, dreams are 1/60th of prophecy, then when a person experiences a little bit of a greater degree of that experience, because it's mamish death, mamish, it's not just sleep, a person feels like they're dying, a person's whole self melts away, and there's zochet to hyper-realistic dreams, which are not dreams, it's the expansion of the energy of dreams, maybe it's a little bit more of nevuah, but it's still emergent from a place of the Eitz Hadas, Toivera, because it's still a mix. And it takes a lot of guidance and it takes a lot of wisdom to be able to tease apart the experience and to say what's useful here that I'm going to take and what's not useful that I'm going to leave behind. That's why it needs to be guided. And ultimately, where does all these things come from? Plants. Where do plants emerge from? Well, the whole world is daimim, sameach, chaim, medaber. And so the inanimate objects of the world come from the last hey of Yud Kei Vav Kei. Where do plants come from? The Vav. Memela, the Eitz Hadas Toivera, which is the aspect of the Kelipas Nogah, is a plant. And it's very possible that if the Eitz Hadas Toivera is what brought ego into the world, because that's where Adam and Chava rebelled against HaKadosh Baruch Hu and chose to do something of their own accord, and that gives birth to death, and it gives birth, right, and it gives birth to an independent consciousness, then how incredible it is that at the end of time, specifically people who are suffering in this way of mental health, are able to take a plant that has the exact opposite effect, that destroys the ego, and can bring a person into a tikkun, into a rectification of all of the maladaptive behaviors that are usually a result of an inflated sense of self, that itself very deeply is usually a result of a protective measure to protect something that's very fragile, and to protect to protect the person. And this maybe is a little bit of understanding what this inyan is, psychedelics. What is it? How does it work, and why it's so important for it? If a person should, want to do more research, you're welcome to speak with me a little bit in the sugya, and we can talk about it. But it needs to be guided, and like Rabbi Nachman told us in Torah Dalid, it's not really about the ratzah and the experience. Some people, they'll go and chase experience after experience after experience. I've certain people that I know that it can become very, very unhealthy. It has to be if it's what's that?
If a person is doing it to attain such a certain spiritual what's it? So it's like, okay, so you're not going to do the avoid.
No, we're not. No, we're not.
You're doing
No. We're not. We're talking about mental health interventions. We're talking about people who are suicidal. We're talking about people who need surgery. Nobody's going to say, a person's obese.
So they have a fast route to.
It's not faster. It's not a matter of fast, and it's a lot of work. It's a tremendous
the
amount.
journey ends up at the destination.
It doesn't.
Where people are manually trying to.
It doesn't. It's a tremendous amount of work. It is tremendously painful, and the ikr work starts when a person gets back. It's not a shortcut to anything. People, it's a huge sugya. There are a lot of misconceptions about it. People don't do research properly. They don't understand what it is. And people who do understand that it's not as simple as it is. However, just because a person might advocate for the use of certain circumstances, it doesn't mean that all of a sudden now I call mutter and everything, whatever. That's why I'm trying to deliver here a very nuanced approach, which basically sees it as an extension of sleep, an extension of dreams, but that emerge from the world of Eitz Hadas Tov Ra. Memela, it's going to produce good and bad, and Memela, it needs to be teased apart, and everything is dependent on the interpretation, which in psychedelic terminology is called integration, where a person sits with a therapist and a person works through it, and we tease apart, what is this? What was the meaning? What are you going to take that it should be productive as opposed chas v'shalom, which is also possible that it should be destructive. HaKadosh Baruch Hu should help us by Ezras Hashem that we should be people who are awake to the Tardema, to the Targum of this world, and are people rooted enough in Lashon HaKodesh that we should have the capacity to elevate and to lift up the whole world, and to be able to interpret it as a place that's a malchus to Kedusha, bursting with the presence of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Should have a beautiful lifting in Shabbos.
ואתה האב שלי שכל כך אוהב אותי, האב שלי מלך חי וקיים על כל נשימה שאני